I never believed in ghosts. Not really. I'd always been the kind of person who rolled their eyes at stories about haunted houses, cursed objects, or things that go bump in the night. I'd grown up in a city where the only thing that haunted you was the rent, and the only thing that creaked after dark was the radiator. But sometimes, life has a way of making you question everything you thought you knew. Sometimes, it takes you to a place where the past isn't just a memory, it's a presence. And sometimes, if you're unlucky enough, it follows you home. It started with a dare. Isn't that how these stories always begin? My friends and I had a tradition. Every year, we'd pick a new place to visit, somewhere off the beaten path, somewhere with a story. We called it the Fear Trip. It was supposed to be fun, a way to break up the monotony of our 9-to-5s, to remind ourselves that we were still young, still capable of being scared. We'd done abandoned asylums, forgotten graveyards, even a night in a supposedly cursed forest. But this year, we wanted something different. Something with history. Something with teeth. That's how we found the Marrow House Hotel. The Marrow House wasn't just old. It was ancient, at least by American standards. Built in 1887, it had survived fires, floods, and a century's worth of rumors. It sat on the edge of a dying mining town, its red brick facade looming over the cracked pavement like a warning. The website boasted of authentic Victorian charm and a rich, mysterious past. But it was the reviews that caught our attention. Not the 5-star ones, but the 1-star rants, the frantic, half-coherent paragraphs about footsteps in empty halls, cold hands in the dark, and the infamous 3 a.m. knocking. One review simply read, "Don't stay in room 313. Don't stay on the 3rd floor. Don't stay at all." Naturally, we booked room 313 for 3 nights. We arrived on a Thursday, just as the sun was setting behind the mountains. The town was nearly deserted, the main street lined with shuttered shops and faded signs. The only sign of life was the Marrow House itself, its windows glowing with a sickly yellow light. The air was cold, colder than it should have been for late September, and the wind carried the faint smell of old wood and something metallic. The lobby was a time capsule. Heavy velvet drapes, oil paintings of unsmiling men and women, a grandfather clock that ticked just a little too loudly. The woman at the front desk looked like she'd been carved from the same wood as the banister, thin, pale, and impossibly still. She didn't smile when we checked in. She just slid the key across the counter and said, "If you need anything, ring the bell, but not after midnight." We laughed about it as we hauled our bags up the creaking stairs. The 3rd floor was even colder than the lobby, the air thick with dust, and something else, something sweet and rotten. Room 313 was at the end of the hall, the door painted a deep, peeling red. The key stuck in the lock, and for a moment, I thought it wouldn't turn. But then it did, and the door swung open with a groan that sounded almost like a sigh. The room was exactly what you'd expect from a haunted hotel. High ceilings, faded wallpaper, a 4-poster bed draped in moth-eaten lace. There was a fireplace, long since bricked up, and a window that looked out over the empty street. The bathroom was tiny, the tiles cracked and stained, the mirror warped with age. But it was the closet that caught my attention, a narrow, doorless alcove in the corner, just big enough for a person to stand inside. I felt a chill as I looked at it, a prickle at the back of my neck that I couldn't explain to my friends, Maya, who never met a ghost story she didn't love, Chris, who claimed he'd seen a UFO once but was terrified of spiders, and Jamie, who was always the skeptic, were already unpacking, arguing over who got the bed and who had to take the floor. I took the armchair by the window, telling myself it was for the view, not because it was as far from the closet as possible. We spent the first evening exploring the hotel. The halls were lined with portraits, their eyes following us as we passed. The 2nd floor was closed for renovations, but we could hear faint music drifting up from behind the locked doors, an old, scratchy waltz that faded whenever we tried to follow it. The ground floor had a parlor, complete with a grand piano and a bar that hadn't served a drink in decades. We found a guest book on a side table, its pages filled with shaky handwriting. Most of the entries were mundane: lovely stay, charming staff, but a few stood out. Heard the knocking again. 3 a.m., just like before. Saw her in the mirror. Don't look too long. Leaving early. Can't sleep here. We joked about it over takeout pizza, daring each other to stay up until 3. Maya was the first to suggest a seance. Chris rolled his eyes, but he was the one who brought out the candles. We sat in a circle on the faded rug, the lights off, the only illumination coming from the flickering flames. Maya led the way, her voice low and theatrical. Is there anyone here with us? Anyone who wants to speak? At first, nothing happened. The room was silent, the only sound the wind rattling the window. But then the temperature dropped, so suddenly that we all shivered. The candles flickered, and for a moment, I thought I saw a shadow move in the corner, just a trick of the light, I told myself. Just nerves. We waited, breath held, but nothing else happened. Eventually, we laughed it off and went to bed, the bravado of the evening fading as the darkness settled in. I lay awake for a long time, listening to the old pipes groan and the floorboards creak. At some point, I must have drifted off, because the next thing I remember is waking to the sound of knocking .3 sharp raps coming from the hallway. I sat up, heart pounding, straining to hear. The room was dark, the only light a sliver of moon through the window. I glanced at the clock on the nightstand, 2:59 a.m. I held my breath, waiting. Another knock, louder this time, echoing down the hall. I looked at my friends. Maya was already awake, eyes wide in the darkness. Chris was sitting up, clutching his phone like a lifeline. Jamie was still asleep, or pretending to be. The knocking came again, closer now, as if moving from door to door. I slipped out of bed, feet cold on the wooden floor, and crept to the door. I pressed my ear against it, listening. Silence. Then, just as I was about to turn away, a whisper, so soft I almost missed it. Let me in. I jerked back, heart in my throat. I looked at Maya, who mouthed, Did you hear that? I nodded, too scared to speak. We waited, frozen, as the knocking moved past our door and faded into the distance. For a long time, none of us spoke. Eventually, Chris broke the silence. It's just someone messing with us. Has to be. But I wasn't so sure. The next morning, we tried to laugh it off. We blamed it on the wind, on old pipes, on our own imaginations. But the mood had shifted. The hotel felt different in the daylight, less mysterious, more oppressive. The staff avoided our eyes, and the other guests, what few there were, kept to themselves. At breakfast, an old man at the next table leaned over and whispered, Don't open the door at night, no matter what you hear. We spent the day exploring the town, trying to shake off the unease. But everywhere we went, people seemed to know where we were staying. They gave us the same look, pity mixed with fear. At the diner, the waitress asked, You folks in 313? When we nodded, she just shook her head and walked away. That night, we tried to stay awake, determined to catch whoever, or whatever, was knocking. We set up Chris's phone to record the hallway, propped up by a stack of books. We played cards, told jokes, anything to keep the fear at bay. But as midnight approached, the air grew heavy, the shadows deeper. The hotel seemed to settle around us. The walls closing. I end at 2:45 a.m. The knocking started again. This time, it was different. Slower, more deliberate. 3 knocks, then a pause. 3 more, closer. The temperature dropped, our breath visible in the air. The candles we'd lit for comfort flickered and died. One by one. I grabbed my phone, heart racing, and checked the hallway camera. The screen was black, the battery dead. I cursed under my breath, but before I could say anything, the knocking stopped right outside our door. We held our breath, listening. Then, a voice, clearer this time, but wrong somehow. Too flat, too cold. Let me in. Maya started to cry, silent tears streaming down her face. Chris moved to comfort her, but I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, every instinct screaming at me to run, to hide, to do anything but open that door. Jamie, who'd been silent all night, suddenly stood up. "It's just a prank," he said, voice shaking. "I'm going to prove it." Before any of us could stop him, he unlocked the door and yanked it open. The hallway was empty, no footsteps, no shadows, nothing but the long, dark corridor stretching away into silence. Jamie laughed, a brittle, desperate sound. "See? Nothing. Just our imaginations." But as he turned to close the door, I saw something move at the far end of the hall, a shape, tall and thin, just beyond the reach of the light. I blinked and it was gone. We didn't sleep that night. The next morning, we found muddy footprints outside our door, bare, human, but impossibly long. The staff refused to clean them, and when we asked about the knocking, the woman at the front desk just shook her head. "You should leave," she said, "before it gets worse." But we didn't leave. We were stubborn, or stupid, or maybe just too scared to admit we were scared. We spent the day researching the hotel, digging through old newspapers at the library. The Marrow house had a history, all right, a long one. Fires, suicides, disappearances. Room 313 had been sealed for years after a guest was found dead inside. The door locked from the inside. No sign of a struggle. The only clue was a message scrawled on the mirror in what looked like blood: "Don't let it in." That night, we barricaded the door with a chair, pushed the dresser in front of the closet, and left the lights on. But it didn't matter. At 3 a.m., the knocking started again. This time, it was inside the room. The sound was unmistakable, 3 sharp knocks, not from the hallway, but from inside the room itself. For a moment, none of us moved. The air was so cold it hurt to breathe, and the silence that followed the knocking was thick, pressing in on us from all sides. I could hear Maya's breath hitch, Chris's knuckles cracking as he gripped the edge of the bed. Jamie's voice caught in his throat as he whispered, "Did you hear that?" We all heard it. There was no denying it now. The knocks had come from the closet, the narrow, doorless alcove in the corner, the one I'd avoided since we arrived. The shadows inside seemed to pulse, darker than the rest of the room, as if the light itself was afraid to go near it. I wanted to say something, to break the spell, but my mouth was dry, my tongue heavy. It was Chris who finally moved, grabbing the flashlight from the nightstand and shining it toward the closet. The beam flickered, the batteries already dying, but it was enough to see that the space was empty. At least, it looked empty. The darkness inside seemed to swallow the light, and for a moment, I thought I saw something move, a flicker of pale skin, a glint of eyes. But when I blinked, it was gone. "We need to get out of here," Maya whispered, her voice trembling. "We need to leave. Now." But the door wouldn't budge. The chair we'd wedged under the handle was still in place, but the knob wouldn't turn, not even when Jamie threw his weight against it. It was as if the wood itself had fused, trapping us inside. Panic rose in my chest, hot and suffocating. I pounded on the door, shouting for help, but the only answer was the echo of my own voice. Then, the knocking started again, this time, from the window point, 3 slow, deliberate raps, as if someone, or something, was tapping on the glass from the outside. We all turned, eyes wide, as the curtains fluttered in a wind that shouldn't have been there. The window was on the 3rd floor, facing the empty street. There was no balcony, no fire escape, nothing for anyone to stand on. But the knocking continued, steady and patient. Chris edged toward the window, flashlight trembling in his hand. He pulled back the curtain, and for a moment, I saw his face go pale, his eyes wide with terror. There's someone out there," he whispered. I forced myself to look. At first, I saw nothing but the reflection of our own frightened faces in the glass. But then, as my eyes adjusted, I saw it, a figure standing on the narrow ledge outside the window. It was impossibly tall, its limbs too long, its face hidden in shadow. Its hand was pressed against the glass, fingers splayed, leaving smears of something dark and wet. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, watching us, its head cocked to one side as if curious. Then, slowly, it raised its other hand and tapped 3 more times on the glass. Maya screamed, stumbling back from the window. Chris dropped the flashlight, the beam spinning wildly across the floor. Jamie grabbed my arm, his grip so tight it hurt. "We have to do something," he hissed. "We can't just sit here." But what could we do? The door was locked, the window blocked by something that shouldn't have been able to stand there. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in, the air thick with the smell of rot and old, wet earth. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the knocking stopped. The figure outside the window vanished, melting into the darkness. The temperature in the room rose, the oppressive weight lifting just enough for us to breathe again. That we sat in silence for what felt like hours, too afraid to move, too afraid to speak. Eventually, exhaustion won out, and one by one, we drifted into a fitful, uneasy sleep. When I woke, the sun was streaming through the window, warm and golden. For a moment, I thought it had all been a dream, a nightmare brought on by too many ghost stories and too little sleep. But then I saw the handprints on the glass, long and smeared, the dark stains already drying in the morning light. We didn't talk about what happened, not at first. We packed our bags in silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts. The door opened easily now, the chair sliding away as if it had never been wedged there at all. The hallway was empty, the hotel silent except for the distant ticking of the grandfather clock at the front desk. The woman looked up as we approached. Her eyes lingered on the dark circles under our eyes, the way our hands shook as we handed over the key. "Did you see her?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper that we didn't answer. We just left, the weight of her question following us out into the cold morning air, but we didn't go home. Not yet. Something about the hotel, about what we'd seen, wouldn't let us go. We needed answers, needed to understand what had happened to us. So we went back to the library, back to the stacks of old newspapers and yellowed photographs. The Marrow house had always been a place of tragedy. The first owner, a man named Elias Marrow, had built the hotel for his wife, a woman named Lillian. She died before the grand opening, her body found at the bottom of the main staircase, her neck broken, her eyes wide open. Some said she'd fallen. Others whispered that she'd been pushed. After her death, guests began to report strange occurrences, cold spots, whispers in the night, the sound of footsteps on empty stairs. Over the years, the stories grew darker. A maid was found dead in room 313, her wrist slashed, the words "Let me in" carved into the wall above her bed. A traveling salesman vanished without a trace, his luggage found neatly packed by the door. A child went missing, last seen playing in the third-floor hallway. The hotel changed hands many times, each new owner trying, and failing, to rid the place of its ghosts. Some tried exorcisms, others simply closed off the third floor. But the stories persisted, growing with each retelling. We found a photograph from 1923, a group of guests standing on the front steps. In the back row, half hidden by the others, was a woman in a white dress, her face blurred, her eyes dark and empty. The caption read, "Lillian Marrow, forever watching." We spent the rest of the day piecing together the hotel's history, trying to make sense of what we'd experienced. The more we learned, the more we realized that we weren't the first to be haunted by the Marrow house, and we wouldn't be the last. That night, we checked into a motel on the edge of town, too afraid to go back to the hotel, too restless to leave. We sat in silence, the weight of what we'd seen pressing down on us. Maya finally broke the silence. "We have to go back," she said. "We have to finish this." Chris shook his head. "No way. I'm done. I'm not going back in there." But Jamie was already nodding. "She's right. We can't just run away. Not after what happened." I didn't want to go back. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to forget, to move on. But something inside me, curiosity, stubbornness, maybe just fear, wouldn't let me walk away. So we made a plan. We'd go back to the Marrow house, just for one more night. We'd bring cameras, recorders, anything we could think of to document what happened. We'd stay awake, together, and face whatever was haunting room 313. We returned to the hotel just before sunset, the sky painted in shades of red and gold. The woman at the front desk didn't say a word as we checked in, just handed us the key with a look of pity. The third floor was colder than ever, the air thick with anticipation. We set up our equipment, cameras pointed at the closet and the window, recorders on every surface, our phones fully charged. We sat in a circle on the floor, backs to the wall, eyes on the shadows. The hours crawled by, each minute stretching into eternity. The hotel was silent, the only sound the distant ticking of the clock. Midnight came and went, then one, then two. We waited, breath held, hearts pounding at 2:59 a.m. The knocking started. This time, it was everywhere, on the door, the window, the walls. The sound echoed through the room, growing louder, more insistent. The temperature dropped, our breath fogging in the air. The cameras flickered, the screens filling with static. Then, the voice, clearer than before, closer, "Let me in." The closet door, which had always been just an open alcove, now looked impossibly deep, the shadows inside swirling and shifting. A cold wind blew through the room, carrying the scent of roses and decay. The knocking started, slow and deliberate, echoing through the room. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The closet door swung open, and she stepped out, her eyes fixed on mine. "Let me in," she whispered, her voice a cold wind in my ear that I woke with a start, my heart pounding, sweat soaking my sheets. The clock on my nightstand read 3:00 a.m. The next day, I called the hotel. I don't know what I expected, maybe to hear that it had burned down or that it was being demolished. But the phone rang, and finally, the same woman who'd checked us in answered. "Marrow House Hotel," she said, her voice as flat and emotionless as ever. I hesitated, unsure of what to say. I stayed there, in room 313, a few weeks ago. There was a long pause. "Are you all right?" she asked, her tone softer now. "I don't know," I admitted. "I keep seeing her, hearing her. I need to know. Is there a way to stop it?" She sighed, the sound heavy with years of regret. "Some people say you have to make peace with her. Others say you have to forget. But the truth is, once you've seen her, she's always with you. The Marrow house doesn't let go." I thanked her and hung up, the words echoing in my mind. The Marrow house doesn't let go. I tried to forget, to move on, but the dreams continued. The knocking grew louder, more insistent. I started seeing her in the corners of my vision, a pale shape flickering in the shadows. I stopped sleeping, afraid of what I might see when I closed my eyes. One night, desperate for answers, I went online, searching for anyone who'd stayed at the Marrow house. I found forums, message boards, threads filled with stories like mine. People who'd seen her, heard her, felt her presence long after they'd left. Some claimed to have found ways to break the connection, rituals, prayers, offerings. Others said there was no escape. I reached out to a few of them, hoping for advice, for comfort. Most never replied. The ones who did told me the same thing. Don't let her in. No matter what she says, no matter how much she begs, don't let her in. But it was too late for that. She was already inside. The next time the knocking came, I didn't run. I sat on the edge of my bed, heart pounding, and waited. The sound was softer now, almost gentle. 3 slow knocks, then silence that I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered, "What do you want?" For a moment, there was nothing. Then, a voice, her voice, soft and sad. "Remember me." I opened my eyes, and she was there, standing at the foot of my bed. Her eyes were no longer empty, but filled with sorrow, with longing. She reached out, her hand hovering just above mine. "Remember me," she said again, her voice breaking. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "I remember." She smiled, a small, sad smile, and then she was gone. The room warmed, the shadows receded, and for the first time in weeks, I felt at peace. The dream stopped after that. The knocking faded, replaced by a sense of quiet, of closure. I still thought of her, of the Marrow house, but the fear was gone, replaced by something softer, pity, maybe, or understanding. I called Maya, Chris, and Jamie, told them what had happened. They tried it too, facing her, acknowledging her, remembering her. One by one, the nightmares faded, the fear lifted. We never went back to the Marrow house. We never needed to. But sometimes, late at night, I think of her, Lillian, the woman in white, forever watching. I wonder if she's found peace, or if she's still waiting, still knocking, hoping that someone will remember her. And I remember. I always will, but the story doesn't end there. A year passed. Life moved on. We drifted apart, each of us changed by what we'd experienced. But the Marrow house lingered in the back of my mind, a shadow I couldn't quite shake. One day, I got a letter. No return address, just my name, written in a shaky hand. Inside was a photograph, room 313, the closet door open, a pale shape standing in the shadows. On the back, a single sentence, "She's still there." I stared at the photo, my hands trembling. The image was blurry, the figure little more than a smudge of white and gray. But I knew, without a doubt, that it was her. I called the hotel, but the number was disconnected. I searched online, but the website was gone. The Marrow house had vanished, as if it had never existed. But I knew better. Some places never let go. I kept the photograph in a drawer, hidden beneath old receipts and forgotten birthday cards. I told myself it was over, that whatever haunted the Marrow house was finally at rest. But the truth was, I couldn't stop thinking about it. About her. About the way her story had tangled itself into my life, refusing to let go. Months passed. The seasons changed. I moved to a new apartment, started a new job, tried to build a life untouched by ghosts. But every so often, I'd catch a glimpse of white in the corner of my eye, or hear a faint knocking in the quiet hours before dawn. I told myself it was just my imagination, the residue of fear that clings to you long after the danger is gone. But then, one night, I got a call from Jamie. He sounded different, tired, older, his voice rough around the edges. "I need to see you," he said. "It's important." We met at a coffee shop downtown, the kind of place that never closes, where the lights are always too bright and the coffee always tastes burnt. Jamie looked like he hadn't slept in days. His hands shook as he stirred sugar into his cup, his eyes darting to the door every few seconds. "She's back," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought it was over, but I keep seeing her. In the mirrors, in my dreams. It's like she's trying to tell me something. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Have you tried remembering her?" "Like before." He nodded. "It worked for a while. But now it's different. She's not sad anymore. She's angry." I didn't know what to say. The fear I'd buried came rushing back, cold and sharp. What do you think she wants? Jamie shook his head. I don't know, but I think we need to go back. The words hung between us, heavy and impossible. Go back, to the Marrow house, to the place that had nearly broken us. That I wanted to say no. I wanted to walk away, to let the past stay buried. But I saw the desperation in Jamie's eyes, the way his hands trembled, and I knew I couldn't leave him to face it alone. That we called Maya and Chris. They were hesitant, afraid, but in the end, they agreed. We made a plan, one night, just the four of us, to find whatever unfinished business still lingered in that place. The drive back to the town felt surreal, like stepping into a memory. The streets were emptier than I remembered, the buildings more faded, the air thick with the scent of rain and old wood. The Marrow house stood at the end of the street, its windows dark, its sign hanging crooked above the door. The hotel was closed, the doors locked, the windows boarded up. But Jamie had found a way in, a side door, half-rotted, the lock broken. We slipped inside, our footsteps echoing in the empty halls. The air was colder than I remembered, the darkness deeper. Our flashlights cast long, trembling shadows on the walls, illuminating the peeling wallpaper, the dust-covered furniture, the portraits with their eyes scratched out. That we made our way to the third floor, the stairs groaning beneath our weight. The hallway was silent, the doors closed, the air thick with the smell of mildew and something sweeter, roses, faint and cloying. Room 313 was at the end of the hall, the door warped and swollen with age. Jamie pushed it open, the hinges screaming in protest. The room was just as we'd left it, bed unmade, closet door ajar, window cracked open to the night. We set up our equipment, cameras, recorders, anything we could think of to capture what might happen. We sat in a circle on the floor, backs to the wall, eyes on the shadows. For hours, nothing happened. The hotel was silent, the only sound our own breathing, the distant rumble of thunder. Midnight came and went, then one, then two. We waited, hearts pounding, nerves frayed. At 2:59 a.m. The knocking started. It was softer this time, almost hesitant. 3 slow raps on the door, then silence. We held our breath, waiting. The door creaked open, just a crack. A cold wind swept through the room, carrying the scent of roses and decay. The shadows in the closet deepened, swirling and shifting. Then she stepped out. Lillian, the woman in white. Her eyes were no longer empty, but filled with rage, with pain. She moved toward us, her steps slow and deliberate, her presence filling the room with a suffocating sense of dread. "Why did you come back?" she whispered, her voice echoing in our heads. Jamie tried to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. Maya reached for my hand, her grip tight, her eyes wide with fear. "We want to help you," I said, my voice shaking. "We want to understand." She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You can't help me. No one can. Not anymore." The air grew colder, the shadows pressing in. The walls seemed to close around us, the room shrinking, the darkness alive with movement. Chris stood up, his voice trembling. "What do you want from us?" She turned to him, her eyes burning. "I want you to remember. I want you to see." The room shifted, the walls dissolving into mist. Suddenly, we were somewhere else, another time, another place. The hotel, but not as we knew it. The wallpaper was new, the furniture polished, the air filled with laughter and music. We saw Lillian, alive and beautiful, dancing in the parlor, her dress swirling around her. Elias Marrow watched from the doorway, his eyes dark with jealousy. The scene shifted, Lillian alone on the staircase, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. A shadow loomed behind her, a hand reaching out. A scream cut short as we saw her fall, her body crumpling at the bottom of the stairs, her eyes staring up at nothing. We saw Elias standing over her, his face twisted with rage and regret. The vision faded, the room snapping back into focus. Lillian stood before us, her eyes filled with tears. "He killed me," she whispered. "He pushed me, and then he lied. He told everyone I fell. He locked me in this place, trapped me here, forever." We sat in stunned silence, the weight of her story pressing down on us. Maya was crying, her tears silent. Chris stared at the floor, his hands clenched into fists. Jamie looked at Lillian, his eyes filled with pity. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice barely audible. "I'm so sorry." She looked at me, her expression softening. "It's not your fault, but you have to help me. You have to set me free." "How?" Jamie asked, his voice trembling. She pointed to the closet, her hand shaking. "He hid something. Something that binds me here. Find it. Destroy it. Only then will I be free." The air grew colder, the shadows deepening. We moved to the closet, our flashlights trembling in our hands. The space was deeper than it looked, the darkness swallowing the light that we searched, our hands brushing against old wood, crumbling plaster. Finally, Maya's fingers closed around something cold and hard. She pulled it out, a locket, tarnished and heavy, its chain tangled with dust and cobwebs. Inside was a photograph, Lillian, smiling, her eyes bright. On the back, a single word, "Forever." Lillian reached for the locket, her hand passing through it like mist. "Destroy it," she whispered. "Please." Chris took the locket, his hands shaking. He hesitated, then threw it to the floor, smashing it beneath his heel. The metal twisted, the glass shattered, the photograph curling and blackening in the cold air that a scream filled the room, high and keening, echoing through the hotel. The walls shook, the floor trembled, the air filled with the scent of roses and smoke. Then, silence. Lillian stood before us, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for remembering me, for seeing me, for setting me free." She smiled, a soft, sad smile, and then she was gone. The room warmed, the shadows receded, the air filled with the first light of dawn. We sat in silence, the weight of what we'd done settling over us. The hotel was quiet, the sense of dread lifted, replaced by something softer, peace, maybe, or closure. That we left the Marrow house as the sun rose, the sky painted in shades of gold and pink. The town was waking, the streets filled with the promise of a new day. That we never spoke of what happened that night. Not really. Some things are too big, too strange, to fit into words. But we knew. We'd seen her, helped her, set her free. And in doing so, we'd set ourselves free, too. The weeks after that final night at the Marrow house felt like waking from a long, fevered dream. The world seemed brighter, lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from our shoulders. I slept through the night for the first time in months. The knocking was gone. The shadows in the corners of my room were just shadows again, nothing more. I called Maya, Chris, and Jamie, and heard the same relief in their voices. We didn't need to say it out loud. We all knew something had changed, but the Marrow house was never far from my thoughts. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, I'd remember the way Lillian's eyes had softened when we destroyed the locket, the way her voice had trembled with gratitude. I wondered if she'd found peace, if she'd moved on to whatever comes next. I hoped so. She deserved it. Life moved on. We drifted apart, as friends do. Maya moved to another city, chasing a new job and a new start. Chris got engaged, his laughter returning, his old bravado back in place. Jamie started writing again, his stories darker, richer, filled with the kind of truth you can only learn from facing your fears. I found myself drawn to old buildings, to places with history and secrets. I started volunteering at a local historical society, cataloging artifacts, listening to the stories of people who'd lived and died long before I was born. One afternoon, As I was sorting through a box of old photographs, I found a picture that made my heart stop. It was the Marrow House, taken decades ago, the hotel standing proud and new against the sky. In the window of room 313, a woman in white looked out, her face blurred, her eyes dark and deep. I traced her outline with my finger, feeling a strange sense of connection, of closure that I took the photograph home, framed it, and placed it on my desk. It was a reminder, not of fear, but of courage. Of the night we faced the darkness and found a way through. But the story of the Marrow House didn't end with us. Word spread through the town about what we'd done, about how the hotel felt different now, lighter, less oppressive. The new owners reopened the third floor, inviting guests to stay in room 313. Some came hoping for a thrill, others seeking answers. Most left with nothing more than a good story and a shiver down their spine. But every so often, someone would leave a note in the guest book. Felt a presence, but it was gentle. Dreamed of a woman in white. She smiled at me. Woke at 3 a.m., heard soft singing. Not afraid. The legend of the Marrow House changed. It became a story of redemption, of peace found after pain. The townspeople stopped warning visitors away. Instead, they spoke of Lillian with respect, even affection. The hotel became a place of memory, not fear. Years passed. I visited the Marrow House one last time alone. The lobby was brighter, the air warmer. The woman at the front desk was new, her smile genuine. She handed me the key to room 313 without hesitation. The room was just as I remembered. High ceilings, faded wallpaper, the closet now empty, just a space for suitcases and coats. I sat by the window, looking out over the street, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The air was still, peaceful. That night, I woke at 3 a.m. The room was quiet, the only sound the distant hum of the city. I waited, half expecting to hear the old knocking, to see Lillian's pale face in the shadows. But there was nothing, just a sense of calm, of rest. I whispered, "Thank you," into the darkness, and felt a warmth settle over me, gentle and kind. When I left the next morning, I signed the guest book. She's at peace now. So am I. I never returned to the Marrow House. I didn't need to. The story was finished, the circle closed. But sometimes, late at night, I think about that hotel, about the friends who stood with me in the face of fear, about the woman who waited so long to be remembered. I think about the power of stories, how they haunt us, heal us, change us. And I remember that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it, to walk through the darkness and find the light on the other side. If you ever find yourself in a place like the Marrow House, an old hotel with too many secrets, a room that feels colder than it should, a voice in the night asking to be let in, remember this: you are not alone. The past is never just the past. It lives in the walls, in the stories we tell, in the memories we carry. And sometimes, all it takes to set it free is to listen, to remember, to say, "I see you. I hear you. You matter." That's what I learned in the world's most haunted hotel. That's what still haunts me, not the fear, but the memory. The knowledge that even the darkest places can be filled with light, if we're brave enough to look. And if you ever hear knocking at 3 a.m., don't be afraid. It might just be someone asking to be remembered.